Welcome back to another episode. That was very excited. In today's episode, I want to discuss a few things. First up, stimulant use during the end of prep, my struggles faced over the past few weeks, my perspective, mindset regarding prep at this point, and finally, just give you a life update on how everything's going. First up, stimulant use during the end of prep. So, I think stimulants can be used effectively during prep. Specifically, the two main ones I can think of right now would be caffeine and nicotine. Most people know that caffeine's a stimulant, and most people use caffeine in some form, whether that's coffee, energy drinks, supplements, pre-workout, what have you. Now, there are a few reasons why caffeine can be particularly helpful during prep. The first one is it does likely suppress appetite to a small extent, as do a lot of stimulants. And so during prep, when your appetite is elevated, having caffeine can help you stay a bit fuller, or at least not eat as much, which, given that during prep, one of the biggest obstacles you'll face is increased hunger, increased caffeine intake during prep can help. The second benefit would be caffeine is technically ergogenic, which means it improves performance in a variety of tasks, from endurance tasks to more strength-based, like 100 max tasks, and just overall it seems to improve performance in a variety of things. Not to an insane extent, but definitely to a notable extent. This effect might diminish somewhat with habitual use, but there likely still remains an effect even when it's consumed pretty habitually. So that's also useful during prep, because during prep, when your aim is to maximize muscle retention or even gain some muscle, improving performance within a session likely could lead to increased stimulus and thus increased growth overall. Finally, the third reason why caffeine can be helpful is it's a stimulant. It increases motivation to train, and that also impacts stuff like, in my experience at least, your motivation to do work. So outside of training, outside of prep itself, your motivation and energy to do other things like, do PhD work, do coaching work, be doing your laundry, doing your chores, and that sort of thing, that can all take a hit, and so having caffeine can help you combat that and overcome that as well. Now, there are a few potential issues with caffeine use during prep. The biggest one probably is sleep. If you don't manage timing and dosages properly, excessive use of caffeine can definitely interfere with sleep, and bad sleep, to any meaningful extent, will likely counteract or counterbalance any positive effects you get from caffeine in the first place. And so timing your caffeine usage properly and making sure your doses are adequate is quite important. Now, in my case, I've used caffeine during the last maybe 12 weeks of prep. Before that, I didn't really use it much. I think I used 200 milligrams upon waking, right after waking up, and that was fine. Didn't interfere with sleep at all. And then around 12 weeks out from the show, so around 10 weeks ago now, I started using it twice per day. So once at around 8:30 a.m. when I get up, and once around 3 p.m. That's around 9 hours before my bedtime, which I think, give it at least 6 hours before your bedtime. If you consume caffeine much after 6 hours before your bedtime, you might be risking some worse sleep, and at that point, I think it's not really worth it anymore. In my case, I take it at 3 p.m., which is 9 hours before my bedtime, and that's been fine. Now, more recently, I would say the past week or two now, so really the last 4 weeks before the show, so I was already up to 400 milligrams a day, but recently I've upped it to, on some days, as high as 550, in the form of an energy drink. Usually I take caffeine pills just for convenience and price as well. It just saves money. But recently, with my increased appetite, increased cravings for flavor essentially, having an energy drink before my AM session has been helpful. Because at this point, as I'll get into later, training is really burdensome, really hard, and I can't get excited for it at all. But yeah, so caffeine usage is at an all-time high. It's helped with getting my steps in, it's helped with training itself, it's helped with appetite, but it is very much a matter of timing it properly. I need to time it properly in relation to my workouts, I need to time it properly in relation to my sleep. And then that brings me to nicotine. Nicotine has somewhat similar effects to caffeine. It's not used as widely as a supplement if you ignore smoking and vaping the like for prep, but I think it's kind of underrated. So nicotine, also a stimulant, by itself, in gum or lozenges, like I'm taking them right now as we speak, they have a very low addiction potential. Like, it's very rare that you get addicted to nicotine, and in fact, they're used as a replacement therapy for people who are trying to quit smoking. And if you look at the evidence on health side effects from nicotine usage by itself, there's essentially nothing. It's quite safe as far as supplementation goes. Now, as far as its effects go, the first one would be, and I think the major one, is appetite suppression. So, from what I understand, again, I've discussed this previously, but from what I understand, the appetite suppression effect is fairly temporary, and once you come off nicotine, it rebounds. So it wouldn't be a long-term weight loss solution, but during prep, and I think during the last month of prep or so, it can be quite helpful. Now, what's worth noting is nicotine has a very short half-life. I think its half-life is around 2 hours, which means pretty regular usage throughout the day is beneficial. And I've used it in one way, which I'll discuss soon. But I'd say taking it somewhere between 3 and 10 times per day is probably fine. 3 times if hunger is not really an issue, and up to 10 times if you don't get many side effects and it helps you out and it doesn't interfere with sleep. Second effect is, as with caffeine, it does increase motivation, stimulate you, which can be helpful for training, for general life as well, just everything essentially. Now, the downside of nicotine is twofold, I suppose. Like with caffeine, if you take it too close to sleep, it can interfere with sleep. This is much less of a concern on caffeine just because, as I said, nicotine's half-life is around 2 hours versus caffeine's half-life, which is like around, I want to say 3 to 5 hours-ish. I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's definitely longer. Which means you can take nicotine later on in the day and still be fine. And the second downside is, as I mentioned, it's not really a long-term weight loss solution because after you discontinue usage, it rebounds your appetite and you regain a bunch of that weight, most likely. Or at least it makes it harder not to regain it. So it's useful for prep, but not really useful for weight loss. Now, the way I've used stimulants during this prep has been caffeine once when I wake up at 8:30 a.m. and then again at 3 p.m., 200 milligrams both times, and then one more potential caffeine drink before my AM session. This just helps me out with getting me going in the morning, getting some steps in, and just generally making sure I get through a day. Because at this point, as I get to now, I am struggling with prep. So here's some of the stuff I've faced over the past few weeks. My energy levels are definitely at an all-time low. It's very reminiscent of what depression was like, except I'm also physically more tired, though it's difficult to delineate what's sort of psychologically induced physical tiredness or what's actual physiological fatigue, and they're very difficult to distinguish. Regardless, prep has me feeling as tired and fatigued as ever before. Besides that, hunger, all-time high. I've had a few days, maybe 3 or 4 days in a row, where because of how hungry I was having, 3 or 4 out of my 5 meals a day within the first 4 hours after waking up, which then meant for the rest of the day I had to survive with 1 meal. And that was because I was so hungry in the morning that I just couldn't, wait around until I was supposed to eat my next meal. I just had to get it done. I was still able to track and stick to my macros as planned, but meal timing was worse than usual. And recently, that's how I've been using nicotine mainly. What I'm doing now is I've got these meal timings planned out, like I'm having my breakfast around 8:30, then I'm having my second meal post-workout after my session, which is around 11:30, then I'm having my third meal around 1 p.m, and so forth. Now, how I've been using nicotine to combat this issue of eating all my meals early in the day and then not having any calories left for rest, which is suboptimal from a variety of perspectives, from maximizing glycogen replenishment to maximizing muscle protein synthesis to a variety of things, and even hunger management, most likely. It's not really a long-term approach because, it helps in the morning, but then you get to 5 p.m. and you're starving and you have one more meal. It's not helpful. So I've been using nicotine now is, as soon as I finish a meal, I take a lozenge of nicotine. For me, a lozenge takes around an hour to dissolve fully in my mouth. And during that time, you're not supposed to drink or eat. So even if only because of that, it's helped me to not eat and to sort of delay my next meal by at least an hour or two. Plus, by the time the lozenge is dissolved, nicotine starts to hit me and I'm less hungry. And because nicotine is also a stimulant, it's helpful in getting me to stay focused on my work, which distracts me from my hunger and helps me do work even while I'm deep into prep and quite fatigued. And so overall, taking nicotine 1-2 milligram lozenge after each meal has helped me with focusing on work and with hunger management and making sure I don't have all of my meals in the morning, which is what's been happening on a few days recently. As far as caffeine goes, I try and make sure I get my caffeine in, again, 8:30 a.m., 3 p.m., which is around an hour before my AM session and my PM session respectively. Generally speaking, guidelines for caffeine usage are that you should take it around an hour before your session, and so that works out quite well. That's part of the reason why I train at around 9:30 and 4 p.m. respectively, because it gives me a bunch of time between sessions, enough time to recover, but also because it's not so late that caffeine usage can then interfere with sleep. So that's how I've been using, wow, more sirens, I love it. That's how I've been using nicotine and caffeine lately. Nicotine primarily as a sort of hunger management strategy, and caffeine primarily as a, okay, let's get off my ass and go train or do my steps or get me through a day. So yeah, that's how I've been using those. Now, I've also faced other struggles. Like at this point, I've experienced a lot of the things that bodybuilders talk about in interviews and stuff, where as an outsider, you might think they're being dramatic. I was talking about this with a friend of mine today. As an outsider, you might be thinking, oh, these bodybuilders are always talking about how towards the end of prep, their food focus is huge, they can only think about food, they have no energy, they don't want to do anything, they just want to lie down, they get out of breath easily. I, before initiating this prep, was struggling to understand how that was even the case and whether people were just being dramatic. Having gone through it now, not only do I feel like a much better coach as far as bodybuilding is concerned, just because I've actually gone through it, I've got that level of experience of what it's like, but I also now realize all the shit they talk about, it's true, When I go to bed at night, for example, I just see food, like when I close my eyes and try and go to bed. For the most part, I just see food. I think about, oh, this body part's still a bit fat, or I need to work on this pose, or I think about the competition itself. I think about how many days are left. At this point, I'm so deep into prep and very exhausted that I have like 6 different countdowns in my head from how many days until the show, how many days of hard training are left, how many hard sessions are left, how many hard lower body sessions are left specifically, how many hard days of dieting I have left before the peak, which is a time when I'll get to eat a bit more. And it's just draining. Like it's really hard. As I said before, prep has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And so, as much as I've been able to, I've tried to still focus on my PhD, still focus on coaching work, still focus on everything else. Because A, I don't want to waste this time. I don't want prep to consume my life. And also, focusing on other areas of my life can help me manage my hunger, manage my thoughts a little bit. But yeah, honestly, fatigue, hunger, food focus, body image issues, irritability, sort of depressive-like symptoms, fatigue, all of those are an all-time low/high, and it's been rough. This brings me to my perspective/mindset regarding prep at this point. I definitely don't want to compete again in bodybuilding for another 2 to 5 years. A lot of natural bodybuilders straight up don't compete that often because of how tiring it is and how much of a strain can place on your life. And you need to be in a really good spot in life to compete. This is something I've mentioned in an interview that's coming out soon. But since then I've come to realize it even more. bodybuilding is not a very lifestyle-friendly sport. Can you recreationally bodybuild and get pretty lean and, gain some muscle? Hell yeah, that's quite convenient. You can fit it into your lifestyle fairly easily. But bodybuilding to show level is a very different beast. And so the off season is where it's at as far as being accommodating towards your lifestyle and that sort of thing. And so I don't plan on competing again in bodybuilding for 2 to 5 years. At this point, as I mentioned, I've got so many countdowns in my head, so much sort of stress and anxiety and whatever, that I'm really focusing on taking one day at a time, winning the small battles of, okay, tomorrow is a new day. I'm 2 weeks out now as of this recording. Tomorrow's a new day. What do I have to do? Tomorrow's a Sunday. I'm going to do my steps. I'm going to do my posing. And then for the rest of the day, I'm just going to sit down and do some work. And, socialize and all that. But the hardest parts by far of my day now are getting my steps in, getting my training in, staying somewhat consistent with meal timing and not going over my calories, and posing. Posing at this point is also quite difficult and effortful, and so I'm focusing on taking one thing at a time, only doing the main things fast, doing them when I have the most energy, so doing my steps, training, posing, when I have the stimulants acting up, like in the morning, I take caffeine an hour for my session, go train, try and do my posing pretty close to that so I have the energy to do so. And then when I have less energy, I try and relax or do some work that's less physically demanding, because at this point, the physically demanding work is by far the most challenging. So yeah, my perspective and mindset regarding prep at this point is to focus as much as I can on taking one step at a time, not think far ahead, because if I do, I get overwhelmed by the challenges, how much time is left, the hunger, the sort of almost hopelessness regarding the end of prep, how difficult it is. And so if I don't focus on it one day at a time, I get overwhelmed, and that's not helpful. In that way, it's also quite reminiscent of depression, in that when you're depressed, something that can happen to you and what it can feel like is that there's no hope and there's no end in sight. And that way, prep right now does feel like depression in a sense. Finally, I want to give a life update. The rest of my life, as I mentioned before, has definitely suffered as a result of prep. Not so much during the first 10 to 15 weeks, but definitely during the last 10 weeks or so of prep. I've still been able to do PhD work. I've still been able to do coaching work. Coaching is going very well. I've got more demand than ever before. I think I'm doing a good job with clients. I'm doing my best. I increased prices recently because of how much demand I've had and because I don't have that much time to dedicate to coaching. And so I want to be able to spend enough time on each client, with each client, to give each client my best service and really help them out. So coaching is going really well. I have planned out my Christmas now. I'm going back to London for 4 days with family as a Christmas gathering, and then I'm going back to Belgium, to Brussels, for a week from the 27th of December till the 2nd, which includes my birthday on the 28th of December. I'm turning 22 years old. And it's been fun planning that out. I've also been getting more into cooking. I think because of how much more food focus I've experienced over the past few weeks, I'm getting increasingly excited to get more into cooking once prep is over. And so I've ordered a bunch of cooking ware, ingredients and stuff like that. And I want to get a lot more into cooking. I've already planned out some meals for post-show, going to a sushi all-you-can-eat, going to a Brazilian barbecue all-you-can-eat, going to a variety of dessert places. I've got it planned out. Obviously, most of my meals are going to be, very satiating, very micronutrient-dense meals that I'll make myself at home. But then some meals will definitely be celebration meals. And ultimately, if I plan on regaining 4 to 5 kilograms in a matter of a month initially to get back to a more comfortable body fat and to, put out the fire that was prep, then having those higher calorie meals and enjoying myself is very much necessary, both from a psychological recovery perspective, to sort of reset myself after all the pain and suffering, to be dramatic, of prep, and also from a physiological perspective to regain that weight that I lost and get me back to a better place. Anyways, that wraps up this video. I talked about stimulant use, my struggles that I've faced over the past few weeks, my perspective and mindset regarding prep at this point, and I've given a general life update on what I've been getting up to, how coaching's going, PhD work, and stuff like that. For the future, I plan on making a lot more, how should I put it? Not clickbaity, but more viewer-friendly videos. Sort of like 20-second videos about posing tutorials, or 10,000 calorie challenges, or just like day in the life type of videos. I'm going to try and make some content that's more long form, like the ones I've been making now with contest prep series, and then some more accessible, less time intensive for the viewer videos, and yeah, more production heavy as well. I'm considering hiring a videographer and or editor in the future to make that easier, because I don't have that much time, and so provided income is there to fund it, I'll definitely look into doing that at some point. Anyways, that was about it. If you enjoyed the video, please comment, like, subscribe. I am now 2 weeks out, so stay tuned, and I'll see you again in the next one.